All right, it is now 7:33, and we have reached the magic number of 25 that can be on the screen at one time. So we have a full house to begin with, and everybody else is overflow. So you have a standing room on presentation tonight. From Swords to Plowshares, Northeast, and it's a demonstration and training session. I'm going to turn the program over now to Bishop James E. Curry and Dr. Pina Villano from Swords to Plowshares Northeast. Take it away.
Well, good evening. My name is Jim Curry. I'm one of the co-founders of Swords to Plowshares Northeast. Pina is also one, and she'll be speaking in just a minute. We're from the greater New Haven area in Connecticut. And our program is one that actually has 4 pillars to it. We help organize communities to hold gun buybacks and gun givebacks. We encourage people to really think about the issue of the gun that's in your house and how dangerous that is for your own family and for others. And if you need to keep that gun, then we're going to work with you to make sure that it's securely locked and securely in place. So that's pillar 1, gun buybacks. The second pillar is that we take the guns and work with police departments to destroy them, and then using blacksmithing skills, we forge them into garden tools. Swords to plowshares. More on that later. But the focus really is to get our minds wrapped around the fact that we're caught in gun violence, and we can be released from that as we pound these guns into new shapes. Sometimes that's a musical instrument, sometimes that's jewelry. Most of the time it's gardening tools, which we then give away to community gardens, churches, schools, universities, youth empowerment programs, where they're growing things. And it is a major shift from the understanding of what that instrument was in the beginning. The third thing that we do is that we're really an educational outreach. We're mobile, and we will go anywhere in the Northeast to share what we do and how we do it, and encourage people to try to work in your communities, to build community gardens, to hold gun buybacks. And if you can find somebody who's a little crazy enough to be a blacksmith, to actually do the destruction of weapons and the reforging them into tools of health and nurture. And the fourth thing we do is we do research. We do surveys at every gun buyback, and we take that information, because there's very little information about the efficacy of gun buybacks. We have lots and lots and lots of anecdotal information, but especially because of the restrictions about gun violence research in the past, we're starting to build up a database and a platform for publication of the information that we need so much about gun violence prevention. So that's my little start. Pina, welcome.
I think your audio is not on. It's on, but I think it might be on your computer system side.
Pina, did you enter through the speaker side or just join? If you will go back to your email and enter where it says join from your email, I think we'll be able to hear you.
Okay, and while she's doing that, Matt, could you put up our PowerPoint, please? Oh, Diana's doing it. Okay. Okay, so this is a basic outline of what we're going to be trying to deal with today. We've already started to talk about a little bit about who we are in Swords to Plowshares. We're part of a network across the country of religious organizations and some non-religious organizations that are focusing on guns to gardens. This idea that this imaginative idea that a gun can be reformed, transformed into an instrument of nurture. So we're going to be talking a lot about how that process happens, how we partner with other community groups. And one of the things we love to do, it, I am so sorry we're having to do this virtually this year, because there's nothing like being right next to the forge and with your hand around a hammer and pounding on a gun, beating a gun into a garden tool at the anvil. I've been a blacksmith only for 5 years. That's not part of the training that's usually part of being a bishop, but it is a wonderfully creative and fairly simple process that we're able to use and to share. And every time we set up anywhere, whether it's on the New Haven Green or on 2nd Avenue in New York or at the Retreat Farm in Brattleboro, Vermont, we have people come who are longing to do something about gun violence. And one of the things we offer is the actual experience of being part of the process of transformation, of actually taking our own energy through the hammer and creating the tool. And it is an amazing thing to watch children, teenagers. I've had 93-year-olds take the hammer and create. Now, Pina, are you here yet? Okay, let's move on to the next slide. And this is a video. Are you there, Pina?
Gun violence remains front of mind for many Americans. College students in Bristol County, Massachusetts got a chance to change up that narrative today.
UMass Dartmouth students molded guns into tools to better their community. Here's ABC 6 News reporter Daniel Coates.
Well,
Diana, we need the video.
That it's
We need the
certainly
video.
been troubling to see the school shootings all across the country. Especially as of late.
Gun violence remains front of mind for many Americans. College students in Bristol County, Massachusetts got a chance to change up that narrative today.
UMass Dartmouth students molded guns into tools to better their communities. Here's ABC 6 News reporter Daniel Coates.
Well, students from UMass Dartmouth told me today that it's certainly been troubling to see the school shootings all across the country, especially as of late. But today they were able to work up close and personal with some of the medals from these firearms, turning a problem into a positive. On the UMass Dartmouth quad, students stepped up and swung away in between classes at the piping hot metals of broken down guns, soon to be transformed into gardening tools, jewelry, and more.
You would never think that something so harmful or can make something so nice and lovable. Instead of the news being talked about, UMass Dartmouth is actually taking this into a different approach.
Swords to Plowshares partnered with New Bedford Police this fall, taking the nearly 24 firearms the department bought off the streets and breaking them down, as they have since 2017.
This is from a rifle barrel. This is from a shotgun barrel. And once these are made, we give them away.
All the guns that we did find that were turned in were legal firearms. None of them were stolen and all that, but they are potential firearms that could end up on our streets through a break into a house or just mishandling.
New Bedford's Police Chief Paul Oliveira jumped into action Wednesday alongside students, professors, and even reporters. So you can really go after it here. Don't try this at home, kids. A symbol of change and peace for many of the faith leaders that have calmed the worries of students in light of recent tragedies.
Something tragic can actually be redeemed into something good. There's nothing more disrespectful to the dead than having been gunned down in the first place. So we have to talk about it.
The tools from today's workshop will be donated to Bristol County organizations in need.
It's a change from an instrument of potential tremendous harm to an instrument of nurture and hope. Our sword happens to be a gun in our society, and we're beating our guns into garden tools.
In Dartmouth, I'm Daniel Coates, ABC 6 News.
Thank you. Now, Pina, are you able to speak with us?
I think there may be a setting on her computer. Pina, if you could call me, I'm going to email you my phone number. And Bishop Curry, if you could continue, then I'll try to get Pina to
I will. I will. One of the great things of Swords to Plowshares when we're face to face and with each other is that we're not relying on high tech, and that we're actually relying on very old technology. A fire, which we happen to do with a self-contained forge with propane, a hammer, and one of the oldest instruments and tools, just an anvil, something to pound on that we can use to shape and to create. So in a sense, I'm not surprised that we need a little bit of glitch with our technology here. Well, we act locally. Swords to Plowshares began as a response to the gun violence in our own communities of Connecticut. For me, that turning point of needing to work for local seeking of peace in our streets happened 30 years ago with the death of a little girl in Hartford who was shot while she was sleeping in the back of her mother's car. The importance of this is that the same thing happened a week ago in Hartford, where a 12-year-old was hit by a stray bullet as she was in a car nearby where there was an altercation between two gangs. Every time we think it should be a turning point, and it isn't. It's not the tipping point yet. So we encourage the conversation. As Bishop Gates said in the video, the worst thing is that people are being killed. We need to talk about this, and we need to keep organizing around our local communities. We've discovered that the Forge is a really enticing kind of place to come to. People want to see it, they want to participate, and then they'll do the next step of helping to do a buyback in their community, of helping to work with the police and with the community leaders, and trying to work with other groups who are on gun violence prevention. We're only one part, and if we could have the next slide, I'd appreciate that. We're only one part of a much larger movement that has a lot of different threads to it, but together we make a tapestry. Our banner starts with the language of Isaiah. 2,500 years ago, his society, like ours, was a violent time. His people lived amidst violence and uncertainty and fear, and yet Isaiah hears the promise of God. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. Well, the sword in our society is the gun. And so we've changed the language for our translation of Isaiah to be this: they shall beat their guns into garden tools. Neighbor shall not raise up gun against neighbor, neither shall they learn violence anymore. And I think especially in the last couple weeks where we've had so many stand your ground kinds of things where neighbor actually is raising up gun against neighbor, that it just gives us more fuel to do the work that we're doing. Could we go on to the next slide, please? Gun buyback programs. They're community level strategies to have people start thinking about what a gun means in their own house. As you know, 2/3 of all gun deaths are suicide by gun. And that's because the gun's in the house. It might be forgotten in a basement or in an attic. It might be in a bedside table, but it's there. And those same guns are there when children get curious and when teenagers in their thoughts that nothing can ever harm them start playing very, very dangerous games. So not only do we try to get guns off the streets, we want people to really think about getting guns out of their homes. And that's what a buyback can do. We've been doing them for a long time and with varying degrees of success. As I said earlier, one of the things that we want to do is document the efficacy of buybacks. Right now, it's all anecdotal, and I can give you lots of stories about people who want to get rid of their guns and don't know how to do it, and who really like the idea of not just sending it to a compactor and it gets broken up and made into just little pieces of metal, but they love the idea that it's going to be repurposed to something that has a value in our lives. Right now, buybacks are infrequent and small scale because of funding more than anything else. Communities, churches, individuals have to raise the money if we're going to exchange something of value for the gun itself. And the question about how it reduces firearm injuries, well, again, we don't have longitudinal studies, but what we do know is if the gun's not there, there's not going to be a gun violence injury. As I said, 2/3 of all gun deaths are suicide. That's because the gun was available and it's efficient. A lot of child accidents come from unsecured guns. When there's a gun in the house, the lethality of domestic violence rises exponentially. And then, of course, there's the other category of crime. And one of the things that a gun buyback does is often suburban homes are broken into, and the guns that are stolen in a suburban home get into areas of cities where the guns are being brought in. So, goals of gun buybacks, really simple: to promote firearm injury prevention. We also build relationships. One of the things we've seen in Massachusetts and in Connecticut as we've done gun buybacks across the states is that it's a win-win for the police. They're part of a community process here, and as they're working to bring these guns in and to destroy them and to reform them, it's really good publicity. And over and over and over again, we have police saying, thank you, come back. That's certainly the case with that chief we saw just in that video, the Chief Oliveira in New Bedford. He just loved the idea that I would come to his loading dock and together we'd destroy guns. It was just a wonderful time together. The other thing we do in buybacks, we want to make sure that we have available, and usually from the police, gun locks, and when we can afford it, gun safes. And if we can get a company to help us discount gun safes, people want them, especially more and more as those are becoming safe storage laws in a place like Connecticut and other states. We are not against gun ownership. We are for gun violence prevention. And we are for good neighbors and adequate training on how to store and keep families and neighborhoods safe when there are guns present too. Next slide, please. And so there are a bunch of different kinds of gun buybacks, and that's going to depend on your region, your state, maybe even your county. Law enforcement very often will like to do it, but they'll say we can't afford it. So if you're going to give something in return for the gun, somebody else is going to have to raise it. So that's an important piece. We've had tremendous success with faith-based organizations. In Bridgeport, Connecticut, the Council of Churches raised $16,000 for a buyback in just a week. That's how much interest there was within the congregations. We've had wonderful success with city governments. The city of New Haven, my city, is now funding our buybacks as part of their public health budget. Now there can be as in Australia, that can be a different kind of gun buyback. It's the one that says, you gotta give us your guns. That doesn't fly in this country. We've realized that that's a non-starter. So what we're gonna continue to do is invite. We do this anonymously so that anybody can bring a gun in. They don't have to have an ID. They're also, there's a blanket permission on days of buybacks to have a gun in your car to get to the place of the buyback. We've found that the idea of anonymity just makes it easier for people to give that gun up. Now, other places have chosen to do it differently, to do it only with IDs. Our recommendation is not to do it that way. Next slide, please. So we've given in the past gift cards, we've given cash. One of my great mentors is Bishop Denise Shengilani from Mozambique. And in Mozambique, when they did their big gun buyback, after their Civil War, inviting people to bring their guns in out of the countryside. What they offered was seeds and subsistence gardening tools and some building materials and some pedal sewing machines and bicycles. What they offered were things that the society needed, the people needed, and were much more healthy in the production of their new society than the guns would have been. And one of the things we haven't done yet is really figure out in those areas where people are so afraid that they think they need to have their gun, we haven't figured out what is it that we can give as a neighborhood, as a society, as a community to them that would allow them to let go of that instrument, which can be such an instrument of harm, not just for others, but perhaps for themselves. We've decided only to take operable guns. We also take BB guns though. And if somebody wants to turn in an inoperable gun, we'll just not give them a value for it. Maine has a wonderful tradition of givebacks. They've had tremendous success up there with the story of how to give up your dependence on your gun and to be more safe in your homes. And people turn their guns in without any kind of financial incentive. That won't work in Connecticut, but it is working wonderfully in places like Maine. And of course, the greatest incentive is a safer home, a safer family, a safer community. Next. Gun buybacks, gun violence prevention programs all need to be tied in with all sorts of partners. This is just a list of the kind of things kinds of organizations that it just makes sense to connect with. I want to say one thing about the media. Swords to Plowshares has been extremely fortunate. TV stations love to see the Forge at work. That's what that clip was from Providence TV last week. They'll come to a gun buyback. They'll come to a demonstration, and they'll ask really good questions. And I think it's really quite important to cultivate, my gardening word, cultivate relationships with local media. We're going to Brattleboro, Vermont this weekend, and we just had a long article in their statewide e-news. I guess it's also a handout that happens on Wednesdays. But partnerships, absolutely necessary. Next. So these are the tools. Whoops. On the right-hand side, these are the tools and jewelry that we make. We make two different kinds of tools, one from a shotgun barrel and one from a long handgun barrel or a rifle barrel. We cut the barrels up into about 7-inch sections so that we can work them on the anvil. There's some other pictures coming up later. The heart is an important piece for us because not only do we in this country have a gun problem, we have a heart problem. And we make hearts out of rings that have been cut from gun barrels, primarily shotgun barrels. And those hearts can be made into fancy jewelry like the ones pictured here, or we often, when we're doing a demonstration, invite people to come and make their own heart wonderful symbol of the transformation that we're seeking in all of our hearts. The other picture here is a creative solution. This is a community garden that's being built by medical students at UMass Medical Center in Worcester, Mass. And we came and gave tools to them, and this is their first harvest. Next slide. So once we get the guns, we work with police to make sure that those guns aren't part of any evidence chain. We'll then destroy them, dismantle them, usually in police presence. We take the pieces, we forge a lot of them. Last week, again, at UMass Dartmouth, we took also a great big bucket of all the little pieces that come out of a gun when you're destroying it, and we gave it to the art department. And they have a welding art program, and they were just so excited to be able to get pieces of the guns, pieces that we really can't use in the creating of the tool. And they're going to be working on presenting art show this time next year. I think that's enough. We want to plant gardens. One of the things that research is now starting to really point out is that green space, especially in cities, helps change the nature of a community. And so we look especially for people who are doing community gardening work and tie them in with master gardeners, tie them in with groups that could come and help create the garden and then to maintain the garden. And we hope that then the produce of that garden gets then turned back as gifts to the community. Next slide, please. This is what a gun buyback looks like. The guns are secured, they're inventoried. Eventually they will be test fired. And that's under the partnership of people that know what they're doing. In some states, the rules for gun ownership allow groups like Sword to Plowshares or Raw Tools to actually destroy guns on the spot. That's not true in Connecticut. We have to work through a much more detailed legal system. So it's important to check where you are to see what happens with the guns as they're brought in. And you can see in the top right picture that we get usually about an even number of handguns and long guns, and every time usually 1 or 2 assault style rifles. Next slide, please. Pina and I are here at the Hartford Police Department sawing off the barrels of guns. And on the top right, a friend of mine who's a police officer in New Haven said that he would like to do this work, and he has a cutting torch that's destroying the guns. We use the guidelines from ATF so that the gun could never, ever, ever, ever be put back together to be a gun. Next slide, please. And this is the work that I really wish you could be participating in today. The work at the forge and the lathe. We hammer the gun parts into the tools, and then we make handles for all our tools also. Next slide. During buybacks, the lower right shows the mayor of New Haven, and I can't see if that's Senator Blumenthal or not, but I think it is, with nursing students who have come to help us for that. In the bottom left, those men were men that had been incarcerated, and before the pandemic, we had a great program with the local jail in having a training program for men and women to learn the skills of blacksmithing, but mostly to have a sense of a time when we could talk about gun violence and transforming culture of guns to a culture of nurture. We're trying to start that again after the pandemic. It's been really slow because there's been a lot of, and this is true everywhere, a lot of change in administrations. But I think by the end of the summer, we'll have that going again. Next slide, please. Our forge is absolutely mobile. We have a wonderful trailer that we can pull. This is a picture of a beautiful morning in Washington a year and a half ago. And it's with our representative, Rosa DeLauro. Senator Blumenthal was also part of that demonstration. We've now been in Washington 4 times. And we really go up and down the East Coast. From Washington's about the furthest south we've gone, but we've gone from there up into Maine to do community demonstrations. Next slide, please. We're part of a group called Guns to Gardens. It was started by Mike Martin of Raw Tools. Mike is the inventor, the godfather of this whole movement of transforming guns into garden tools. He and his father started a group called Raw Tools in 2013. Facing the massacre at Sandy Hook Elementary School, Mike said, we gotta do something different and we gotta do something tangible. So that's where the gardening tools began. And in the intervening years, groups across the country have been tying in with making gardening tools from guns. And a couple of years ago, more and more groups started to try to do buybacks or givebacks. So Mike organized us to say, let's do this as a national event. Let's figure out who's doing what, invite others to join us, and set a specific day, or in our case, mostly it's about a week. It's around the week of gun violence prevention and Wear Orange Day, and invite people to try this. And with the idea that the guns aren't just going to be brought in and destroyed, but they're going to be transformed into tools, musical instruments, art, and jewelry. Next. And here are the goals. They're the same kind of goals, but at a national level. One of the important things in the gun violence prevention movement is that we got to work together. It's been so often the case that one group goes off and we don't talk to one another. So one of the things we're really trying to focus on is collaboration and partnership. And we want to encourage communities to host voluntary, anonymous gun buybacks. And for all the reasons we've already talked about. And most importantly, we want to get the data from those gun buybacks. Again, anecdotes say that they work. Skeptics say they don't. And so what we really want to do is build up a database and publish information about whether or not gun buybacks really work. I mean, you know, we have to be open to the realization that maybe they don't create the magic of gun violence prevention. But the one thing I can tell you is every gun that's brought in is one less gun that can harm or kill somebody. Next. So this is who we are, and technology has kept Pina from doing this with us, but I want to tell you a little bit about her. Dr. Pina Villano has a 40-year career of being a nurse, often in emergency rooms, often working with injury prevention and with ways to get the community more involved in being safe and nurturing communities. She's a professor at Quinnipiac University and is especially focused at community outreach. She also is our key person. If you really want to do a gun buyback, hers is the number to call. And she'll do everything with all her partners and with all her connections to have that gun buyback in your neighborhood work. And that's it for our presentation. But what I'd love to do is really open it totally to you all and hear what you want to say. And also we'll try to answer any questions that you might have.
I'm going to help you with this, Bishop Curry. Pina
Great.
and I are communicating in the age of technology. Anyone who is on the screen right now, one of the things that was really important to Swords to Plowshares is they be able to communicate directly with you. So if you are able to turn your cameras on and ask questions, that would be great. And we will, you can raise your hand and we'll call on you. We want this to be an interactive session where you can verbalize your thoughts. And I will work with Pina to make sure that she shares the information that she has. There's also the icon to raise your hand that Kent is using. Yep. And I'm going to let Kent be the first one to ask his question. But let me just say this also, that Pina was also responsible for developing this presentation and worked together to customize it for the things that we want to talk about tonight with EAD. But this is, and she has other statistics and information about why this all works. But you can tell there's a team in place with her and Bishop Curry, because he was able to jump right in and cover everything as if she was there. So that just shows you what a real team is all about. So we're going to go ahead with questions, and I'm going to start first with Kent, and then we'll go to John, and Pina will be responding in the chat if it's something she needs to chime in that Bishop Curry doesn't cover. So we'll go ahead with Kent. Okay. You can be the first one to ask your question.
Thanks to you, and thanks to all of you who've been working on this. We are interested in starting such a program. I'm in Berea, Kentucky, where we have, as you know, Kentucky has suffered recent terrible mass shootings, so awareness is high. I have some very practical questions. How much do you offer for your buybacks? How much initial capital should we be looking to raise if we wanted to start a program? What are some of the minimum equipment we need in order, if we wanted to, create a day? What I have access to blacksmiths. I have access to, I just don't know what to ask for.
Yeah, with Berea, you certainly do have the skills running around you. first question about how much. In some respects, it's dependent on how much can be raised. But let me give you an example of what are norms for people who bring in guns. One is a BB gun is like $10. The fact is that a BB gun can be very harmful, and it's good to get them off. They're cheaply made and so on, but it's an invitation. It's an entrance into the idea of giving up my guns. For a long gun, we're usually about $50 for a long rifle or a shotgun. That changes between communities, $50 to $100. A handgun, some cities put handguns way up because they want them off the streets. What we do is about $150 for a handgun. And then the assault rifle is a lot. It's $250 as a premium to get that out of the community's hands. You know, in terms of what you need to get started, you need to find out what the laws in Kentucky are about guns. In Tennessee, I don't know if it's true in Kentucky, but in Tennessee, any gun that's brought into the police has to be sold. It can't be destroyed.
Really?
So, yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah, I wouldn't be
obscene.
surprised. Yeah, there's some obscenity that is probably part of our life too.
So one thing is to check with community, with the laws. In terms of destroying guns, again, that's going to be how it works within the state of Kentucky. And what we do is follow ATF regulations, which is a specific way to cut apart the receiver of a gun so that it can't be put back in together. And then what you need from the blacksmithing side is just a forge and an anvil. You'll need a metal saw, a cutoff saw, but everything else is just regular blacksmithing. And then to make handles, again, Berea is the sort of the center of the world for this kind of thing. You know, the woodworking could easily be done by artisans in Berea. Does that help? And PINA really is an incredible resource when it comes to how to do the gun buybacks. So I would, maybe we should figure out how to get her email up on this screen so that you could write her.
She's already put it in the chat, and she's also said that a good starting point might be to sort of begin with about $10,000 as sort of startup capital to begin a day. That's perfect.
Yeah,
That's
good.
the kind of thing we needed. Thank you, Pina.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, we've done less in small communities, and when it's interesting, once a gun buyback starts on a day, and we run out of money, a lot of people just hand their gun over anyway because what they wanted to do was get rid of it.
Let's get rid of it.
So, but in New Haven, we aim at $10,000 to $15,000 a buyback.
Okay, thank you.
So John
Okay.
Mattis, you have a question?
Yes, you mentioned that there isn't a lot of research on gun buybacks. And I suspect that that's deliberate, that there's a coordinated campaign to prevent research from being done on anything related to guns. Maybe you could explain that a little bit. But what I'm wondering is, what kind of data collection do you do, and what are you learning?
we do a survey that asks, I'm really sorry that Pina can't answer this because it's her survey. It asks questions not about, trying to find out who you are, but questions like, are there people with mental health issues in your home? Are there children in the home? One of the questions is, how did you get this gun and why do you want to give it away? We get a lot of people coming in after the death of a spouse, the spouse being the gun lover, and the surviving spouse doesn't know what to do with it and is quite actually about having these instruments around. Anyways, it's the kind of question that is just trying to get demographic information. Is it older people who are turning in guns? Is it middle-aged people? Are there children in homes? That kind of thing. About veterans, one of the huge issues in our society is the death rate, the suicide rate for veterans, and the lack of support for mental health for veterans. Well, we're trying to get some information about who owns these guns and why is it now successful in asking them to turn their gun in and to turn it in, to give it away. And I'm sure Pina's doing something.
I'm going to try to see if I can get her on my speakerphone. Pina, can you go ahead and talk through my phone?
No.
On the phone, yeah, she's going to pick up the phone. Go ahead.
Oh, can you hear me on the phone?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Woo!
I said, boy, God doesn't want me talking tonight, I think.
You have to, Pina, you have to hold it right up to your mouth, though.
All right. I said there must be some reason why God doesn't want me talking tonight. But I'm so sorry, and I apologize for all the technical issues here. But as Bishop Curry did a phenomenal job, and some of the things that we look at are around, as he said, access to children in the home, suicide attempts, domestic violence, whether somebody has Alzheimer's, and whether the gun has been stolen. If you run all of them, you're vetted to that. So one of the things that we want is really to close the loop on the other end instead of the background check piece is when someone dies, and how do you close that loop and where does that gun go to? So that's an important piece. Are you just hearing a lot of noise with me here or background?
Stay away from your computer. I'm getting feedback.
It's okay.
Yeah, the feedback is from your computer.
Yeah.
Any specific questions that you have?
Just mute your microphone on your computer.
It is.
Walk away.
Oh, not that, it's that you need to turn down the volume. It's because we're hearing from the computer itself.
On your phone, yeah.
Okay, where'd she go?
But then Charmaine, you need to
Okay,
turn
great.
back on to your mic on to
And
talk.
just allowed me my audio to come back on once it was corrected. Can you hear now?
Yeah.
I can hear. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
So Grace, did you?
Questions, but we work with the police department in your area and ask them what are they seeing, and as Jim talked about with the BB guns, While we all think that they're not harmful, when a police is making a split-second decision whether that gun is real or not and having to pull their weapon, BB guns are pretty hard to figure out in a 3-second period of time if they're real. So we started offering $10 to them just to get those off the street as well. I know that was a question somebody had before.
Right.
Thank you very much for including research in the work that you do. And I hope that you'll figure out a way to share that, maybe with the National Guns to Gardens website. Some way to get out the information, because it's a real problem that we don't have research in this area.
Right. Right. And
right.
we're going
the more
now
we can
to
standardize the data we're collecting, the better. So anybody who is part of our national buyback effort, we're trying to get everybody to do the exact same survey, and depending on what part of the country you're in, some of the questions we asked on the East Coast and let's say New Mexico, they wouldn't even attempt to ask some of the questions we do. So we're working really hard at again, standardizing all of that, because the more information we can get, the more monies we can get, and then we can share with other people to join in our efforts. So from, I have a great track record on getting national grant monies, and we're hoping to do that with this as well. So it is an incredible piece, from my end, as Jim mentioned. I'm a registered nurse that worked in trauma, ICU, ER, you name it. Started a hospital-based violence prevention program and really worked with the street team and the gangs, people that were incarcerated for murder, and hired them on my team to be the credible messengers to respond to shootings in the hospitals. And so, this is important on many levels. Yes, as Sandy Hook and all of those that are happening nationwide, I don't for 1 second, say that those aren't important. But the everyday Black and brown folks that are being shot and killed is a lot more and outnumbered. And so trying to figure out what is needed in those neighborhoods is a little bit different. Different types of programs that we do to target those areas. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. Really looking at what's in your neighborhoods and what needs to be done there. Like some of those areas, we've used recording studio time in exchange for guns. One of the things I'm looking at now is exchanging jobs for guns in those areas. So, I've actually have contacted in the FBI who we're working at how we can do that, with guns and stuff as well. So it's really thinking way out of the box because solutions that we try every day haven't worked. We have a few publications that are out on gun buybacks, and with Mike Hirsch, who's a trauma surgeon, who's really what I've modeled the programs after. We have really pushed it from the medical side, even asking questions now and putting it in our trainings with nursing students and medical students. Do you have a gun in the home? Just like we ask whether you're wearing your seatbelt, whether you have a smoke alarm a smoke detector in your home. So we want to start those conversations right at every checkpoint that they come in contact with a health professional. And so many people don't want us to ask those questions. They don't think it's our business. And I always fully disclose, I am a legal gun owner. And I say that proudly. My husband's public safety. So I think it just leads to the credibility of the work we do. I'm not anti-gun. None of us are. Yes, having a gun in the home, not properly secured, is a risk. And so we educate that at every point. And so we don't ever take your rights away or anything like that. We just have a safe venue to take guns that you no longer need or can no longer secure. And that's really the message we are really strong about, keeping the NRA crap out of it. It doesn't belong in the work we do. It's noise, and it gets in the way of doing work that we need to do. So I just want to make that really clear, But the safe storage piece is critical to this too. because what the survey said, we look at more than half people still have guns remaining in the home. So we really push to keep them locked. And when we have money, as Jim said, that, you know, to give out gun safes and make sure that they know what the laws are in our state and how they should be properly securing them. And also, you know, work with the law enforcement folks as well as the state's attorney and everyone else to make sure that they're being penalized if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing legally. So it goes full circle.
One program that we've started.
I'm sorry.
Oh, excuse me.
I think as
I
we
just wanted
hear
to
about
share
so
one-
many,
Go ahead,
John.
Mr. Curry.
I think as we hear about so many instances of gun violence, there's just despair and discouragement that there's nothing we can do. And what you're proving is, yes, there is something we can do. And so thank you very much for all you're doing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I'm big into the data piece, as Jim's mentioned, and I've been collecting data for over 12, 14 years. And so we have probably the only database like that in the nation that is that extensive. And so, you know, we're trying to get the information out as quick as we can. We're using it for policy, and it was used to introduce Eaton's Law in Connecticut. And we're looking to, you know, again, standardize that across the nation so we can get that out. And, you know, there was a huge amount of time, you know, 10, 15 years. We weren't even allowed to say the word gun because the CDC shut it all down. Now people are coming out of the woodworks, getting grant money and putting out data. But I think the thing that we have here is we actually ask people who own guns, why they have them, where they got them, what are the reasons they're turning them in, how far they come to turn them in. On average, people travel 27.3 miles in our area to turn in a firearm. So these are important, and people will travel to get rid of a firearm out of their home. And so we always will give individualized data back to the police department so they know what's going on as well. And it's all anonymous, and we get almost 100% of people completing a survey at every buyback. So the fact that, you know, people are like, you're in my business, doesn't happen. We're really good at getting the data out at folks, and especially from the medical person, says we want to make sure somebody doesn't get hurt, and you're here to help us understand how we do this. And then I always disclose, I have a firearm. I'm not here to tell you anything different about that because I secure mine properly, and I want to make sure that kids are safe and your families are safe. And nobody argues with you on that. They can't. You shut it down right away.
Other questions from the audience?
I have one last thing to say.
Go ahead, Bishop.
We were able to get a grant this year, and it's the next step. The next step is to train, in this case, young adults from my city, New Haven, and the neighboring city, Hamden, in blacksmithing, to do some training of that, but also to invite them then to create tools. And so we have a pilot project. We're going to have a chance to have 4 interns for 13 weeks this summer and another 4 in the fall, beating guns and creating tools and taking them to schools and gardens and talking to others about gun violence prevention. I'm extremely excited about this because we've had all sorts of success in doing demonstrations with urban kids, urban young adults, and yet we know that they can't just come and work with us for free. They need to be paid. So we're really looking at a business model that will also will continue to be giving away tools, but we'll be able to make enough so that we can also sell significant amounts of tools to help continue the work with these kids who are always looking for a job. and something that they can feel good about doing.
Right, and the mentorship piece of that is so critically important as well.
Do we have other questions from our audience?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Katie.
Amazing hearing about this. This is again a very practical question. In your events, as we've talked about, when guns are introduced into a situation, it becomes more violent. So what security measures do you take at your events? Is that a concern, or how do you do it and plan for the safety of it? Has that ever been an issue?
That's a good question. When we do a buyback, the folk receiving the guns are the police department. And PINA will have a team of volunteers doing the surveys, and once the gun is secured with the police department, then we'll know, what kind of gun it was, what kind of gift card or money should be given back. When we're doing demonstrations at the Forge, we are not inviting people to bring guns to those. That's not the place where we take in guns. So for instance, in Brattleboro, Vermont, this coming weekend, we'll have a big demonstration with the community on Saturday. Friday afternoon, when I first get to Brattleboro, we'll work with the sheriff's department to destroy the guns. And what we'll bring to the event are pieces that are no longer guns.
So the guns are left in the trunks of the car, and the police will get them out that way.
Yeah, we've been fortunate in New Haven to be able to do a real drive-through
Right. And we've
gun
actually,
buyback.
the pandemic helped us with that. So when we were in the middle of the pandemic, we didn't stop doing these events, and we decided to do just, all precautions and masking and all that. And so we have actually left it that way because we do think it's safer. And knock on wood, we've never had any issues. And, you've got, at least 10, 12 police officers fully jacked up with guns on themselves. So it would be pretty bold of somebody to come there and do something like that. We did have the very first one we ever did. We did have a protester out there just holding it up, saying, "You're not going to take my guns." And we actually went out there to talk to him and said, what's the deal? What is it that you want? And we even gave him a cup of coffee, and he actually came in and he saw what we were doing, and he laughed and thanked us afterwards. So sometimes people just don't know what it is you're doing. But we've done enough now, and people know who we are. So we haven't had any of those issues whatsoever.
Somebody just had a hand up. Michael.
Yeah, I just had a question. How do you typically advertise or recruit or get the word out that the gun buyback programs are happening? To me, I would imagine sometimes.
Yeah, so we could always improve on that, Michael. But the local TV stations will always take it on, our local newspapers take it on. And then I've just found that, believe it or not, Facebook and social media is the best way to get it. We've done gun buybacks in 3 days notice, and we get guns in. People actually are waiting for them, and they look every day to see where they are so they can get rid of guns out of their homes. And one of the things that we're seeing a lot more lately, and this is again based off of the data that I'm collecting, is contractors are bringing in a lot of guns now. So as they're remodeling homes, they're finding them in the homes, whether they're taking out a wall or a ceiling. And so I've actually, the last 2 gun buybacks, or 3 gun buybacks now, I've had the same contractor come in with over 6 guns. So that's an area I would never even thought of that. So our data is even showing us that. So that's a piece that I want to actually do some outreach to and let other folks in the contracting business know if they're getting those to, bring them in. So, because I don't know what they're doing with the guns that they're finding. At least this person here told me it, and he gave us his card, and to advertise what he was doing if we needed a contractor. But I think that's another area we need to work on, because I'm finding that the last 3 gun buybacks, it's been evident that this is going on.
Great, thanks. And one other practical question, that is, last time we talked, you had said there's a store on your website where you actually sell the farm tools. You said that you were out of inventory. I'm wondering if that has changed, and if you do have an inventory, if you could share the links to purchase your farm tools.
Yes. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to advertise. I'm going to hire you as our advertising director. We've been trying to rebuild an inventory. We're just about there. After the event this weekend, we're going to open the store again, and that's at s2pnortheast.org and online store. And we have the necklaces available, a double-edged tool that comes from the working of a rifle barrel, and the trowels. Most of the tools we have right now are trowels. But I hope to have that up and working by next Tuesday, once I know what our inventory looks like after this event in Vermont. So thank you for that. We're really working at it. And
So Michael, if you
one
want
of the
to
things
be the blacksmith, come and join us. We need you.
That's right. Well, we'll make sure to post that link in the follow-up email from EAD also.
yeah, it'll be up next week.
Any other questions from our audience? If not, I want to say to both Bishop Curry as well as to Pina, phenomenal job tonight, given all of the challenges that we experienced without being able to have Pina come in to come in and actually be on screen and on the microphone together. But and thanks to Michael Neuroth for the suggestion of moving her to the speakerphone so we could actually hear her voice. Thanks for this great crowd that came in tonight to participate. There are more people in the room than there are able to be on the screen, and that's what our hope was. And lastly, I want to remind you, I've posted the link to where you can actually purchase these garden tools beginning next Tuesday. But do not forget that if you believe in this work that both Pina and Bishop Curry are engaged in, there is an opportunity for you to invest in that work through your EAD offering. And again, I will post it in the chat, but you're seeing it on the general chat for everyone. advocacydays.org/offering. Let's bring in some real money that they can work with so that they can help to get these guns off the street. Too many lives are being lost. Too many people are at risk of suicide and in so many other different situations as a result of these guns. And this is an organization that's doing something in the region where we typically have our in-person event to be able to make a difference. And we hope that part 2 of this will be we actually get a chance to participate in a real live experience of turning guns into garden tools in 2024. So if there are no other questions, we can give you back 13 minutes of your evening. We thank you for showing up for this session, and we thank Bishop James Curry and Dr. Pina Villano for showing out, letting us know, as we say in the old Baptist church, you showed up and showed out, what it really means to put into action our theme, swords into plowshares. Good night, everybody. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you bright and early tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Thank all of you.